Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Oklahoma has been the king of the Big 12 for so long. But they better watch out, because their in-state rival is looking to steal their crown. As today we take a look at Oklahoma State's schedule going into the 2020 season as our 11th ranked team in our way too early top 25. Now I know what some of you may be thinking. How is a team that finished 8-5 last year, including a loss to Texas A&M in their bowl game, number 11 in our way too early top 25, nearly a top 10 team? Let me explain to you something. Oklahoma State was hit with the very unfortunate injury bug, as many teams in college football are hit with every single year. Their quarterback, Spencer Sanders, was really hitting his stride. The passing game was looking great for the Cowboys before he went down with an unfortunate injury, keeping him out the rest of the year. Tylan Wallace, their leading wide receiver and one of the best wide receivers in the Big 12, maybe even the country, also went down with an injury. So while the passing game didn't really necessarily struggle horribly, it wasn't nearly as prolific as it could have been. They were led by Chuba Hubbard, who rushed for 2,094 yards and 21 touchdowns last year. Every single one of those players I just mentioned is returning for the 2020 season. Hubbard shocked everybody by foregoing the NFL draft and coming back for another year in Stillwater. Sanders will be fully healthy. Wallace will be fully healthy. And Oklahoma State will have one of the most prolific and electrifying offenses, not just in the Big 12, but in the entire nation. They're back, they're hungry, they're talented, and the schedule lines up for them that Oklahoma State could very well be in the Big 12 championship by season's end. So we take a look at their schedule here. Opening up the season with a home game against Oregon State. They scheduled that home-and-home series, and the Cowboys went out to Oregon at the beginning of last year and defeated the Beavers 52-36. So the defense struggled a little bit, but you really saw how good that offense could be, dropping 52 points way out west. So it's going to be an intriguing matchup. Thursday night matchup here to kick off the season. Going to be one of the better ones to watch on that Thursday night. Certainly one you're going to want to keep your eye on too, as Oregon State really took a step forward and I think exceeded expectations in 2019. Home game against Tulsa, who they defeated by 19 last year on the road, and then Western Illinois. There's a good chance that Oklahoma State could start 3-0 before their bye week on September 26th. And that's the only downside, or one of the downsides, to Oklahoma State's schedule here, is the fact that their bye week comes in week 4. So they're going to have to play 9 straight games after that bye week. So they're going to be very run down by season's end when they're really going to need to be hitting their stride and winning games to stay in the Big 12 title hunt. Teams have done it. Teams can do it. Oklahoma State certainly can do it. But you kind of like that bye week to be right in the middle of your season and not so early. Coming out of the bye week, they travel to TCU. And this is the beginning of the key stretch for Oklahoma State. This is going to define their season and show whether or not they're going to be in store for another 7-5, 8-4 type season, or maybe they could go 10-2 or better, like the FPI is predicting. They open at TCU, a team that Oklahoma State defeated 34-27 last year. But TCU, they've got major expectations this year, especially with the brand new addition of Zach Evans, the first 5-star in TCU football history. One of the best running backs in the nation coming out of high school. Now going to be playing for the Horned Frogs. Gary Patterson's team probably going to have a major bounce back year, a guy you never want to underestimate. If they go 6-6 or worse, you can usually bank on them having a huge bounce back year the very next year, very next season. So Oklahoma State getting them out of a bye week, which is very fortunate for them, but certainly going to be a very, very difficult test. They then come back home, facing off against Iowa State, who the Cowboys also defeated 34-27 last year, and that was in Ames. That was kind of an upset victory for Oklahoma State. But as we've mentioned, Iowa State's one of those teams that really is just a constant thorn in your side now under Matt Campbell. They can beat you anywhere. Doesn't matter where. Doesn't matter if we're at home. Doesn't matter if we're away. We're going to come in there. We're going to play some very physical football, and we might very well come away with a win. We've seen that ever since Matt Campbell arrived with the Cyclones. They got Brock Purdy back. They're going to have a very dangerous offense and a defense that I think is very underrated. So with this game being at home with a bit of a revenge factor in mind for Iowa State, certainly not a game that Oklahoma State can overlook. Certainly not a game they can overlook if they're emotional after a big win at TCU, if they're 4-0, or even if they're hungover after a possible loss at the Horned Frogs. So a lot of factors at play there against a very dangerous Iowa State team who, to me, is very much so in the top half of that Big 12 going into the season, maybe even in the top 3. They then go on the road to face off against Kansas. Oklahoma State defeated the Jayhawks 31-13 last year. Kansas is hosting a lot of the big boys this year. They're hosting a lot of the top dogs within the Big 12. And I guarantee they're going to knock off one of them. I don't know who it's going to be. But I know Oklahoma State doesn't want it to be them, especially with such high expectations this year. Lawrence is going to be, I wouldn't say a difficult place to play, but it's going to be a scary place to play just because of that potential upset factor. Going up against the Mad Hatter. You're going up against a team that was way more, physical and way more competitive than they should have been in his first year there last year. So this road game at Kansas, certainly not one that Oklahoma State can afford to overlook, and they can't overlook it because the very next week they've got Oklahoma. It's Bedlam. And we always know that with big rivalry games, sometimes teams get caught sleeping because they're overlooking an opponent in preparation for that next week against their big-time rival. Oklahoma State cannot get caught doing that. Cannot get caught doing that, especially at Kansas. So interesting game there. And then Bedlam, October 24th at Oklahoma. Cowboys lost to the Sooners last year, 34-16. Didn't have Spencer Sanders, and the Sooners did a very good job of shutting down Chuba Hubbard. Did a pretty good job of containing him. Now they have to go to Norman. Now they got to go play Lincoln Riley and the Sooners and Spencer Rattler at their house. This game, though, however important it is, especially when it comes to the Big 12 standings, could be a preview of the Big 12 championship game. These very well could be the top 2 teams in the Big 12 if they each live up to their expectations. So this game, as important as it is for both, might not matter too much in the grand scheme of things because they very well could meet again in December in the Big 12 championship game. So a huge game at Oklahoma, one that I think is going to be much closer than that 34-16 game we saw last year. But it might not be the last time or the only time that we see these two squads meet in 2020. So this 4-game stretch, 3 of which are on the road for Oklahoma State, is going to be very, very key. To me, they have to go, if they want to keep their Big 12 title hopes alive, if they want to keep maybe a sliver of their dark horse playoff hopes alive, they've got to go 3-1 in these games. 2-2, you get 2 losses. They might slip up somewhere down the road here in this back half of the schedule, and it's all said and done. 3-1 or 4-0, I think, has to be the case for Mike Gundy and his squad in this very key 4-game stretch. It's very, very difficult. Not ideal, but if anybody can do it, it's the Mullet. Halloween, they faced off against Texas Tech, a team they lost to, surprisingly, 45-35 last year in Lubbock. So Halloween night, revenge on the mind for the Cowboys. Only thing that could hurt them in this game is a potential hangover in a game against Oklahoma. If they do not defeat the Sooners, especially if it's a close game, we always talk about Alabama hangovers, LSU hangovers. There could be an Oklahoma hangover here for the Cowboys. They do not want to get caught sleeping on Halloween against Matt Wells and the Red Raiders. And then they come into the month of November where they have 2 home games and 2 road games alternating there. Road against Baylor, home West Virginia, road at Kansas State, and then home against Texas. They go on the road to face off against Baylor and Waco. Dave Aranda coming in to Waco after Matt Rule left to go take the job with the Carolina Panthers. Oklahoma State lost that game at home 45-27 last year. That's not going to be the case this year. I'm not saying they're going to beat Baylor. I'm not saying they're going to lose to Baylor. But regardless of the outcome, it's not going to be an 18-point game in either team's favor. It's going to be much closer. And I think many people will favor the Cowboys in this game just because of how much Baylor has lost. Even though it's on the road, I think people will be favoring the Cowboys. So an interesting game there. Home against West Virginia, a team they almost lost to last year, only defeating the Mountaineers 20-13 towards the very end of the season. So Neal Brown, I expect to take a step forward in year 2 with the Mountaineers. They find some consistent quarterback play, that defense improves a little bit, and the Mountaineers might be able to go bowling this year. Then Kansas State. You look at this key 4-game stretch, that's obviously important. We've addressed that. I'm not too worried about any of these 3 games per se, but Kansas State on the road, that's the trap game, and that's the trap game especially if Oklahoma State is either undefeated or a one-loss team coming up towards the end of the season. If that is the case, this is the one that could trip them up and ruin everything for the Cowboys. They defeated Kansas State 26-13 at home last year. But I think the Wildcats are going to be even better in year 2 under Chris Klieman. Another very dominant defense, an offense that's finally going to find their groove and consistency. Being in Manhattan, we've seen Oklahoma State struggle at the end of the year before. We've seen them struggle and lose big games at the end of the year. That's ruined everything for them. Iowa State, 2011. So this Kansas State game is going to be huge for them. So major trap game here in Manhattan, and then rounding out the year against Texas, a team they almost went into Austin and beat last year 36-30. This is a game I'm super excited to watch, but they're lucky to be hosting the Longhorns. If the Texas Longhorns live up to their expectations, actually utilize their talent correctly, they are a top 4 team in the Big 12. And this game right here could maybe determine who gets into the Big 12 championship. Many expect Oklahoma to kind of be one of those teams in there. Then it's Oklahoma State, Texas, Iowa State, maybe even TCU, maybe even Baylor that could be battling for that second spot in the title game. And this game right here at Boone Pickens Stadium could maybe decide who the Sooners potentially face in that Big 12 title game. The FPI has major expectations for the Cowboys this year, as do I. They're predicting them to go 10-2, the early projection. 10-2 for Mike Gundy and the Cowboys. That's probably good enough to get into the Big 12 title game, and that's probably good enough to get them into a New Year's Six bowl game as well. And with those 2 losses, whichever 2 those are, if Oklahoma State just wins one of them, they're 11-1 at season's end. Not only are they in the Big 12 championship game, but they are probably 1 win away from making the college football playoff. That's how good this Cowboys team is. The talent is there, especially offensively, for them to be one of the most dangerous and electrifying teams in the entire country. And they're going to be one of my favorite teams to watch in this upcoming season, without a doubt. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at The Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, and subscribe. We appreciate all of your support so much. Check out everything down in the description below for college football news, updates, and offers that you do not want to miss. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.